He was supposed to check a trail camera and head back before dark. That's all. Just a short patrol. But when Ranger Cole Jackson didn't report back, and his radio went silent in the middle of Grizzly territory, the search began. What the rescue team found the next morning stunned everyone, not because of what was missing, but because of what was there. A circle of massive grizzly bears surrounded his unconscious body, and what happened in those hours before help arrived changed everything scientists thought they knew about wild instincts. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like, and turn on notifications. We bring you real stories of wilderness, compassion, and unexplainable bonds every week. Ranger Cole Jackson was known for his steady hands and keen instincts along Trail 17. Every morning before dawn, he'd set out alone on his routine patrol through the rugged backcountry of the Bitterroot National Forest. That morning, like many before it, Cole's plan was simple: check the trail cameras, ensure the roads were safe, and return before the light faded. But as the sun struggled to break through the dense canopy, fate had other plans. Cole's truck rumbled quietly along a narrow, winding road. The cold air bit at his cheeks as he pulled off at a makeshift trailhead. He grabbed his pack, the radio still softly humming with a distant static signal, and began his trek. The forest was cloaked in an eerie silence. Only the occasional rustle of wind through the pines disturbed the stillness. It was then, on a particularly desolate stretch of the trail, that everything changed. Without warning, Cole's boot slipped on a thin layer of ice. One moment he was steady. The next he was tumbling down a slope, colliding with low-hanging branches and rough, rocky ground. His cry was swallowed by the howling wind. When he finally came to rest, he lay sprawled on a bed of pine needles and loose gravel. Pain flared in his shoulder and head, and his radio, once a constant companion, now lay silent beside him. Unconscious, he was oblivious to the world around him. Hours passed in an agonizing void until the first light of dawn filtered through the trees. When a search party finally arrived, led by fellow officer Dana Miller, they found Cole lying prone at the edge of Trail 17. His uniform was torn, and his face was pale as if drained of every color. More shockingly, a large circle of grizzly bears had gathered silently around him. There was an almost surreal quality to the scene. The bears were massive and imposing, dark, powerful creatures with eyes that seemed to hold the raw history of the forest. They formed a loose semicircle around Cole, their heavy breathing visible in the cold morning air. One bear, noticeably older than the rest with a grizzled muzzle and a deliberate, measured gait, took a step forward. Its eyes, filled with an intensity that belied its wild nature, were fixed on Cole's motionless form. Officer Miller, who had arrived with trembling hands, dared not move. He recalled his training, yet nothing prepared him for the sight of these wild beings calmly surrounding a fallen comrade. The older bear shifted its weight and let out a low rumble, a sound that resonated deep in the silence of the forest. The younger bears, likely curious cubs from the group, edged a little closer, their movements tentative and cautious. In that still moment, the natural world and human fragility collided. No one knew how long the grizzlies had been there. The search party speculated they might have been drawn by the scent of blood or by some ancient instinct to protect the fallen. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath as the bears maintained their vigil. Even though Cole lay unconscious, the bears' behavior was not aggressive. They did not try to attack. Instead, they appeared to guard him, almost as if they were keeping him safe. Officer Miller, his voice barely above a whisper, said, "They're not attacking. They're protecting him." The words echoed softly under the heavy boughs of the pines, and in that moment, the entire search party felt a profound mix of awe, fear, and gratitude. As the morning light grew stronger, the bears slowly dispersed back into the woods, leaving behind a silent promise that the wild, in its mysterious ways, might sometimes care for its own. When Cole finally stirred, his eyes fluttering open to a world that seemed both harsher and yet filled with a strange compassion, he could barely remember what had happened. The search party gently carried him to safety, unaware that this inexplicable encounter was only the beginning of a story that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the bond between humans and the wild. The morning after Cole was rescued, Ranger Dana Miller sat alone at the observation post, staring at the security feed from Trail 17. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from memory. What she had witnessed the day before hadn't just unsettled her. It had changed her. There had been at least 5 bears, 4 juveniles, 1 older. None had attacked. None had shown signs of fear either. They had circled Cole's unconscious body like sentries, remaining even as humans approached. It made no sense. Not by the book, not by science, not by anything she had learned over 10 years in the field. Meanwhile, back at the ranger station, Cole Jackson was awake. Bruised, battered, stitched along his right shoulder, but alive. He sat in a cot beneath a humming fluorescent light, staring at his hands. He couldn't remember the moment he fell. He vaguely remembered cold, darkness. Then, something warm. Not a sound, but a presence. Large. Breathing. He tried to tell himself it was a dream, but Dana's voice in the doorway said otherwise. "You were surrounded. They didn't leave you." Cole blinked. "What?" "Bears. Grizzlies. They formed a ring around you until we arrived. They didn't try to harm you. One even stood between us and your body when we got there." He stared at her, waiting for a smirk. A punchline. None came. She placed a small drive on the table beside him. Trail cam caught part of it. By that afternoon, the video had made its way through every ranger's inbox and up the chain to the Montana Wildlife Authority. The footage was grainy, but clear. A massive grizzly bear stepping from the trees, sniffing the air, then lying down beside Cole's body. 2 cubs wandered nearby, then stopped. Calm, alert. The older bear shifted position as Dana's flashlight came into frame. That moment, just before the cubs retreated, was burned into every viewer's mind. The bear looked straight into the camera, not panicked, not threatened, but purposeful. News didn't stay quiet for long. Within 48 hours, the story had leaked to a local outdoor blog, then a wildlife page. Then national media picked it up with headlines like, "Grizzlies guard ranger in Montana wilderness." "Miracle on Trail 17? Bears or guardians? Reporters called it incredible. Experts called it inconclusive. But to the people in that forest, the ones who saw it, it wasn't just a story. It was something else. That night, as Cole tried to sleep, flashes came back. Short, fractured memories. The warmth of fur against his side. The sound of soft grunts near his ear. The pressure of something massive settling beside him, blocking the wind. And then, a low, deep breath. Not like a growl, more like a sigh. He sat up suddenly, heart racing. This wasn't just rescue. It was intention. Cole wasn't supposed to return to Trail 17. He was still on leave. His shoulder hadn't fully healed. The Wildlife Authority had asked him to give a statement, undergo psychological evaluation, and refrain from unnecessary exposure to high-risk zones. But the pull was stronger than protocol. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't ego. It was unfinished. So, early one morning, 3 weeks after the fall, he packed a light bag, checked out a cruiser without signing the log, and made the drive alone. The forest was the same, cold, vast, unknowable. But now it felt different. Not dangerous, not safe, just awake. Every branch seemed to lean closer. Every gust of wind whispered memory. He hiked to the same bend where his boot had slipped. The slope was still steep, covered in patches of frost. A new wooden marker had been installed there. Caution, unstable trail section, no access. He ignored it. He moved slowly, deliberately, and when he reached the spot where they'd found him, the hollow in the rock ledge, the crushed brush, he stopped. The clearing was quiet. No signs of disturbance, no blood, no footprints. But something else caught his eye. Just off to the right, carved into the soft bark of a birch tree, were deep claw marks. 3 long strokes, not made in panic. Too clean, too deliberate. They weren't fresh, but they were recent. Cole stepped closer and placed his hand against them. They were the same size as the older Grizzly's paws, and they were facing inward, toward the clearing, like a signal, a claim, or maybe a warning. He turned to leave, and froze. At the ridge above the clearing, no more than 50 yards up the slope, a shape stood motionless. A young bear, smaller than the adult from before, lighter coat, eyes wide, watching, not moving, just standing there, staring at him. Cole's breath caught. Not from fear, from recognition. This was one of the cubs. Older now, but unmistakable. They watched each other in silence. Seconds stretched into something else. Then, the cub took one slow step forward and sat. Not threatening, not afraid. Just there, as if to say, "I remember." Cole slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a granola bar. Not to feed, not to lure, just to place something between them. He knelt, set it down on a flat rock, and backed away. The cub didn't move. Not yet. But his head tilted. His breath puffed in the cool air. And for a moment, Cole felt the same weight he'd felt that night, when fur had pressed beside him, when breath had steadied his heartbeat, when something wild had chosen not to end him, but protect him. He left the clearing quietly. Didn't speak. Didn't look back. But in his chest, something had shifted. The bears hadn't just stayed that day to watch. They had made a decision. And now, they were waiting to see what he would do with it. The next time Cole returned, he brought something with him. Not food, not tools, something older than both. A leather pouch, faded, scratched, tied at the top with a single strip of sinew. Inside it was a small bell, part of a collar that had once belonged to a tranquilized cub rescued from poachers 2 years earlier. It had been left behind after a release effort failed. Cole remembered that cub. He remembered the eyes, wild, but not angry, just confused, alone. That cub had never returned. But somehow, it didn't feel lost anymore. It felt related. He hiked to the same ridge, the same slope where he'd seen the young bear before. The air was colder this time. The forest was damp, scattered with melting snow. Branches were heavy with water and silence. He moved slow, each footstep a decision. At the same clearing, he found the rock. The same flat stone where he had left the granola bar days ago. It was gone. But in its place, a pine cone, perfectly placed, centered, deliberate. Cole blinked, stepped closer. It wasn't coincidence. He knelt and placed the pouch gently where the pine cone had been. Didn't say anything, didn't expect anything, but his heart was thundering. He sat on a nearby stump for over an hour, listening, waiting. The forest stayed still, not quiet, but watchful. And just when the sun dipped enough to burn the tops of the trees gold, the young bear appeared. Same slope, same pause. But this time, no hesitation. It stepped forward, slowly, one paw after another, heavy and real and quiet. It reached the rock, sniffed the pouch, touched it once, then looked up at Cole, not for permission, for acknowledgement. Then it sat, and stayed. They sat like that, man and bear, for 20 minutes, neither moving, just breathing in the same forest air, until the bear rose, turned, and walked into the trees, the pouch still resting on the rock, untouched, but not rejected, accepted. Cole returned every other day, never with food, never with cameras, just presence. Sometimes the bear appeared, sometimes not, but each time the pouch was still there, sometimes moved, sometimes covered with a leaf. Once, surrounded by small, flat stones arranged in a circle. Cole didn't tell anyone. He couldn't, because what he was part of now wasn't science. It was ritual, a conversation without language. Then, on the 5th visit, something changed. There was movement deeper in the trees. Not one bear. 2. And the second one? Larger, older, scarred around the muzzle. The one from the rescue. The mother. She stood still behind the younger one. Didn't growl. Didn't come forward. Just watched. The younger bear nudged the pouch, then looked to her. She didn't react, didn't flinch, but her eyes never left Cole, not for a second. He stood slowly, backed away, one hand over his heart, not for show, because it hurt, because somehow that look, her eyes locked on his, was the same one from the day he nearly died, and he understood. This wasn't about territory. This wasn't about dominance or curiosity. This was about something remembered, something passed down. Cole had become a different man, quieter, slower. He still lived in the same cabin at the edge of the park, still wore the uniform when needed. But his heart wasn't in trail maps or budget meetings anymore. It lived in the forest now, somewhere between the claw marks on the birch tree and the pouch on the stone. He had stopped talking about the incident. Even Dana had let it go. But stories never stay buried in places like Madison County, and the wrong person finally heard the right rumor. Dr. Nolan Reeves was a wildlife biologist out of Missoula. Young, ambitious, more field-hardened than most academics. He had published a viral paper the year before about emergent cognitive empathy in apex predators, specifically grizzlies. And when he heard whispers of a ranger protected by wild bears and returning regularly to meet them, he couldn't resist. He made a few calls, got Cole's name, got directions, and then, without warning, he showed up. It was a Tuesday morning when Cole heard the second pair of footsteps. He had just finished placing a small river stone beside the pouch, a gesture, nothing more, when he turned and saw the figure in a windbreaker, camera slung around his neck, stepping into the clearing. Cole's heart dropped. "You shouldn't be here," he said calmly. "I had to see it for myself," the man replied. "I'm Dr. Reeves, from the university. I didn't invite you, but you didn't deny it either." Cole looked past him, already alert to the energy shift in the trees. Everything was listening now. Even the silence felt different. Then it happened. From the ridge, movement. The young bear appeared. And this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, the mother stepped into view. No aggression, no fear, just presence, watching, assessing. Cole whispered, "Don't move. Don't take the photo." But Reeves had already raised the lens. Click. The bears froze. The older one shifted slightly, positioning herself between the cub and the two men. The younger bear let out a soft huff, a warning, not a threat. Cole stepped forward, put his body just slightly in front of Reeves. He spoke gently. "It's okay. We're not here to take, just to return." He knelt, touched the pouch, backed away again. The older bear watched, and after a long, still moment, she turned. So did the younger one, and they disappeared into the trees. Reeves let out a breath like a man surfacing from deep water. "Jesus, that wasn't fear. That wasn't wild. That was..." "A choice," Cole said. "I need to document this." "No," Cole said, firmly. Reeves blinked. This could change everything. Cole stared at him, something steel behind the softness. Exactly. That night, Reeves sat across from Cole at his cabin. He had the photos on a digital card. 3 of them, all perfect, all proof. But as the fire crackled, as the wind returned through the trees like breath, he hesitated. "You really think they remember?" Cole nodded. "I think they never forgot." Reeves looked down at his hand, at the memory card between his fingers. Then slowly, he placed it into the flames. Neither man said a word. But the message was clear. Some truths aren't meant to be published. Some are meant to be protected. The first storm rolled in like a warning. Low thunder over the mountains, the kind that doesn't shake windows. It settles in your ribs. Cole had seen the signs all week. The snowmelt was already heavy. The rivers were high. Trail 17 was flooding in places it hadn't in years. But what worried him wasn't the water. It was what lived near it. He grabbed his boots before the first strike of lightning cracked the horizon. He didn't bring a gun, didn't bring a radio, just instinct and a rope. By the time he reached the overlook above the old crossing near Miners Hollow, the rain was falling sideways. The creek that used to trickle softly through the rocks had become a violent, foaming river. And then, just downstream, he saw it. A flash of brown fur in the current. Small, spinning. He knew immediately. It was her. The young bear, one of the cubs. No longer small, but still too young to survive a flood like that. She wasn't fighting. She was flailing, terrified, exhausted, swept hard against a fallen log that jammed the water like a dam. Cole didn't think. He ran, slid down the embankment, mud clawing at his boots, lungs burning. When he reached the edge of the river, the current nearly pulled his legs out from under him. But he kept going. His hands gripped the rope. He wrapped one end around a pine, the other he looped around himself. And then he jumped. The cold hit like a punch to the chest. The current flipped him once, twice, before he got traction. He kicked, swam, clawed his way toward the bear, who was now barely above the surface. One paw clung to the log. Her eyes wide, foam and rain streaking her fur. She didn't growl, didn't thrash, just watched him. And when he finally reached her, she didn't resist. He hooked one arm under her shoulder, grabbed the rope with the other. He shouted, not in fear, but in defiance. "You don't go under today. Not you." The current fought, but he pulled, inch by inch, until they hit rock, until her paw touched earth, until they were both out. They collapsed on the riverbank, man and bear, soaked, shaking, half-conscious. And when he looked up, she was there. The mother. At the top of the slope, rain pouring down her face, watching, silent. She didn't move, didn't approach, but her breath fogged in the storm air. And Cole knew. She had seen everything. He stood slowly, pulling the young bear up with him. She leaned into him now, as if her bones had decided to trust his. They made the climb together. By the time they reached level ground, the mother bear had vanished. But her prints remained, clear, deep, facing them. That night, Cole didn't go home. He stayed at the ranger outpost, fire stoked high, the young bear lying by the open door under the awning, not inside, but close enough to feel the warmth. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She just slept, safe, alive. And when dawn came, and the rain finally stopped, he opened the door fully. She stood, looked at him, then turned, and walked back toward the trees, stronger, free. Summer came late that year. The last snow melted by mid-May, and the trails reopened with a slow sigh. Cole walked them one final time, not as a ranger on duty, but as a man about to let go of the only world that ever made sense to him. He had submitted his resignation weeks before. No press, no party, just a signature and a quiet drop of keys on the outpost desk. People in town whispered. Something changed him, they said. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't ready for the truth. Some things didn't belong in headlines. Some truths were meant to stay between the trees. He left the cabin on his last day with only a pack, a journal, and the old leather pouch that had never been touched. Just moved. He didn't plan to stop at the clearing on Trail 17, but his feet did anyway. When he reached the stone where he had left the pouch all those months ago, something was different. It wasn't the trees, not the trail, not the breeze. It was what was waiting on the rock. A circle of river stones, placed carefully, side by side. 12 of them. And in the middle, a single pine cone, cracked open, full of seeds. Next to it, something that didn't belong to the forest. His badge. Not dropped. Placed. He stepped back like he'd touched fire. The air was thick with something he couldn't explain. And then, from the tree line, a shadow moved. She stepped out slowly. The mother bear, older now, fur lightened near her face. Alone, but calm. She didn't come closer. Just stood, watching. Cole didn't move, didn't breathe, until finally, he did the only thing that felt right. He knelt and whispered, "Thank you." The bear blinked once, turned, and disappeared into the woods. He didn't take the badge back. He didn't disturb the stones. He just opened his journal and wrote, "The wild knew me better than most people ever did. I was never lost. I was never alone. I was surrounded, and I was chosen." That night, Cole drove away from Madison Pines. But he didn't leave empty. He carried something no one else would understand. Something sacred. A moment. A bond. A life not rescued by protocol or luck, but by recognition. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that compassion lives in places we don't always expect, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes the wild doesn't just survive. It remembers who stood by it.